Enzo Maresca was sacked by Chelsea. Ruben Amorim was sacked by Manchester United. There is a lot of speculation surrounding Thomas Frank at Spurs. Plus, we had that interview from Oliver Glasner after Sunderland beat Crystal Palace at the weekend. So who is next to lose their job in the Premier League? I want to have a little discussion today around just managers, their situations, but also just the manager's job in general in the Premier League. We're going to do a bit of a tier list, but it's more to use it as a vehicle to have a discussion around each individual manager. But who do we think is safe and who do we think could be at risk of losing their job? But before we get the tier list up, I just want to discuss this situation around managers. Because this season, what we've seen a few times now, we've seen it with Glasner, we've seen it with Ruben Amorim, if we go all the way back to the start of the season, we've seen it with Nuno Espirito Santo at Nottingham Forest, where managers are using their time in front of the media, their time in front of the microphone, to control the narrative, to deliver their message, their frustration. And you get the feeling that they are trying to protect their reputation, but also self-sabotage. That was a phrase Nottingham Forest fans used for Nuno Espirito Santo. But you do get the impression that's what they're trying to do. They're coming out and saying this, but what they're really saying is, go on then, sack me. I've had enough. I'm sick of it. Pay me off. I'll be on my way. But before I do go, I'm making it clear it's not my fault. I'm making it clear that I am unhappy with the situation at the football club and it ain't on me. And it varies from manager to manager to manager as to why they've been sacked, why they're speaking out. Nuno's complaints were different to Ruben Amorim, which is different to Oliver Glasner. Why Maresca got sacked was different to all three of them as well. So you have to assess it on an individual basis. But I do think the role of the Premier League manager, and I use that word loosely, is completely different to what it was 15, 20 years ago. And I think some managers are perhaps struggling with that a little bit. And I think clubs are perhaps struggling with that a little bit. Because some clubs are well run and they know exactly what they want. And I think when they employ said person, he knows exactly what they're looking for. And I'm going to take the perfect example. The best example I can think of here is Brentford. Everyone knew when Thomas Frank left, everyone knew what they were looking for. It was a head coach. Don't you worry about player recruitment. We've got that sorted. All you have to do is worry about your team, getting them ready for the next game, getting points on the board, and staying in the Premier League. That's what you have to do. So when Keith Andrews got the job, forget the fact that they promoted from within. They could have went and plucked a head coach out of La Liga. He would have known what his job is at Brentford. It's very defined. You are the head coach. You've got some clubs at the other end of the scale. You had Ruben Amorim saying, I'm not a head coach. I'm a manager, but I'm not allowed to be a manager. Well, everyone knew you weren't the manager at Old Trafford. Everyone knew you were the head coach with the likes of Jason Wilcox already there and those before them as well. No one thought you were the manager of Man U. You shouldn't have thought you were the manager of Man U. But you get some clubs that I think they're just lacking in identity. West Ham United is possibly the best example of this. We go back to last summer. Before we hired Nuno Espirito Santo, we had Graham Potter. Now, Graham Potter at Brighton, again, a very defined role. He knew he was the head coach at Brighton. Don't worry about player recruitment. We've got that sorted. Don't worry about player development. We've got that sorted. All you need to worry about is the first team. That's all you've got to worry about. But when he came to West Ham United, we basically asked him to become a manager. We said, look, Graham, transfer window's open. Who do you want? What players do you want? And he's, well, hang on a minute. I didn't do this at Brighton. His role, we tried to really change his role, and he wasn't able to do it. He was unsuited to the role that we were trying to make him do. But that wasn't a reflection of Graham Potter. It was a reflection of Graham Potter, but it was also a reflection of West Ham United as a football club. And I think today we've still got that old school manager in the Premier League with the likes of David Moyes and Sean Dyche. And if you set them up in a role that they can be that old-fashioned manager, then they'll be fine. But it's when you ask them to do something they're uncomfortable with, I think that's where you're going to struggle. And more now than ever, I feel like there's a big conflict between what the head coach / manager wants in terms of player recruitment and what the football club wants in terms of player recruitment. I feel like player recruitment is where a lot of clubs will either succeed or fail, and it's the success of the player recruitment. But I think a lot of managers will be happy or unhappy based on the player recruitment. How much involvement do they have? Do they have the control that they want? Some don't want control. Some want to be the head coach. They don't want control. But there's others that want complete control. No one leaves without my say-so, and no one arrives without my approval. And I think too many clubs now, they're at a bit of a halfway house where the head coach or manager may have an influence, but not control. And it feels like a compromise. And the problem with compromise in life is that nobody gets what they want. I think we're seeing that at certain clubs now where the board will have some players and the head coach will have some players. The head coach is unhappy because it's not all his players, and the board is unhappy because it's not all their players. So no one's really winning here. And the manager 15, 20 years ago, he was the most powerful person at a football club in the Premier League. And we have to go back to the days of Sir Alex Ferguson, who was possibly the most powerful manager at a Premier League club. What he said went. A player fell out, the player left. Now, the head coach ain't the most powerful person at a football club anymore. He's actually quite dispensable. So if things aren't going well, it's cheaper now to change the head coach than it is to change the playing squad. Things aren't going wrong. It's not the player's fault. It's the head coach's fault. Get rid of him. They've got less power than ever before. They've got less authority than ever before. They've got a shorter lifespan than ever before. They're more dispensable than ever. But head coaches know this. And I think that's why we're seeing more of this speaking out in the media, because they're trying to protect their image. They're trying to protect their reputation, which is, I ain't the problem. This club's the problem. I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. I'm going to take advantage of the era that we're in terms of social media and the internet, because I can get my message out there just like that. I speak, 1 hour later, the world knows about it. Didn't occur 30, 40 years ago in football anymore. The role has changed. The ability to speak has changed. And I think all of it is causing issues for certain clubs in the Premier League and also for certain managers in the Premier League. And Oliver Glasner is just the latest example. I'll be surprised if he's the last one to speak like that in the press. Maybe not that explosive, but to speak out. I think we'll see a couple more between now and the end of the season. Who will they be? Shall we do it as a tier list? I think so. And like I said, I'm using this as a bit of a vehicle to have a discussion around certain managers in particular. And I want you guys to get involved in the comments below. Let me know which tier you would put each manager in the Premier League. At the very top, we've got unsackable. Obviously, no one is unsackable. But it's the ones that are like, firm in their job. Their job is safe as houses. Then you've got pretty safe, the ones that don't really need to worry. They're just not as secure as some others, perhaps. Then you've got needs to be careful. Those who we think is maybe a bad month away from potentially losing their job or for other reasons. Then we've got the P45 time. Those that are potentially losing their job in the next month or walking out of their job in the next month. Let's discuss it. First up, we've got Keith Andrews. I'm going to put him in unsackable. I think he's safe as houses. I think he's one of the safest managers in the Premier League. Brentford must be absolutely delighted with the way things are going, but they'll also be thinking, do you know what? We knew this would happen. That's why we promoted him, because we believe in what we're doing as a football club. We believe in Keith Andrews, and Keith Andrews is delivering. Earlier on this season, it felt a little bit iffy, didn't it? But he's put points on the board, and I'm quite confident that he will still be here at the start of next season. Mikel Arteta, let's just put him up there next to him and let's not bother discussing why, shall we? Michael Carrick, these are in no order, by the way. I just saved the images of 20 Premier League managers and this is what the tier list makers spat it out at. Michael Carrick, I'll put it in pretty safe because it's a difficult one. He's an interim manager. So do I think he's going to see out his contract? Yes. Do I think he'll be here next season? Not sure. So I'm going to put him in pretty safe. I don't think he's going to get sacked, though. Dyche, this is maybe a tricky one, isn't it? Because I like him as a manager, and I think he's a good fit at Nottingham Forest. It's got that story, that romance, hasn't it? But the reality is, a couple of bad results for Nottingham Forest, which are not out of the question, then surely his job would maybe be a little bit iffy. Now, I don't think he's P45 time. I'm going to put him in needs to be careful. I don't think he'll get sacked. I think something would have to go really wrong for him to lose his job. But I think the potential for something to go really wrong at Nottingham Forest, whilst it's slim, it's still there. It still exists. Rob Edwards, I'm going to put him in pretty safe. I'm not quite unsackable, but he's closer to that than needs to be careful. An improvement from Wolves, unbeaten in 5 games in the Premier League now. But also when he was appointed, it did feel like it was with one eye on next season. If/when Wolves go down, that's the guy they want in the Championship next season. But he would have had to do reasonably okay between now and then, or I say reasonably, subjectively okay, as in just pick up more points than what Pineda did. Possible not to, perhaps. But how he's done so far at the Molineux, I think it's almost locked in that he'll be there next season, regardless of which division they're in. So I'll put him in pretty safe, only because if Wolves were to go on and lose pretty much the rest of their games this season, maybe he would lose his job. But I don't think they'll do that. They're playing some decent stuff under Edwards. He's got them hard to beat, and that's a starting point. Emery, right at the very top there. Villa, we speak about the role of the sort of the old school manager. Villa are building their club around Emery at the helm, and it's understandable, so it's justified, and it needs to yield results. It's already brought results, but it needs to continue to yield results. And look at what Aston Villa are doing this season. They will. And when you consider the job he's done in terms of how little they can wiggle in the transfer windows, I think it's remarkable, actually. I think he's possibly, if I was to rearrange the tiers at the end, would he be at number 1? Would he be the most unsackable manager in the Premier League? I think it's possible. I think it's worth a discussion, maybe. Daniel Farke, I'll put him in pretty safe. In the summer, they debated sacking him. According to reports, obviously, they debated replacing him, then decided, you know what, we're going to go with him. We're going to give him an opportunity. Then as the season got underway, there was a lot of talk about his job because Leeds weren't performing very well. But that game away to Man City is where he sort of stumbled upon something, which is what the Leeds United fans were wanting to see. And since then, it's just continued working. What's that? 8 games, 1 defeat in it. 9 games, I think it is. 1 defeat in 9 games. And that was away to Newcastle United. 3 wins in there. 5 draws. It's good. Leeds United are doing brilliant at the minute. A very tough team to beat. Ellen Road's a very tough place to go. It always has been, but you need to give them something. You still need to get the results to make it a tough place to go. In terms of atmosphere, it's always there, but on the pitch, it needs to be there, and he's done that. Leeds United have done that. He's doing a good job. He's in pretty safe for me. Oliver Glasner, I'm going to put him in the P45 time. Let's discuss his outburst then. And for those that didn't see it, basically on the Friday, he did a press conference ahead of the Sunderland game, and that's where he confirmed that Martin Gay wasn't going to be playing. He was leaving the club, and also he wasn't staying at Crystal Palace. He would not be signing a contract extension. His contract expires in the summer, and he confirmed he'd be leaving. They got beat 2-1 by Sunderland, and after the game, he said that he and his players had been abandoned by his employers at Crystal Palace Football Club, and the players hadn't been brought in. That Gay was being sold. He was quite clear that he didn't like the fact that Gay was being sold either. And it was very one of those interviews where I felt like he was asking to be sacked. Like it was just someone that had had enough, didn't want to be there anymore. And although the exit's planned, the exit is in sight at the end of the season, I felt like it was a manager who was ready to leave now. Now, since then, they've spoken and he's going to stay there until the end of the season, but I'm not buying it. The reason I'm not buying it is because what happens if they lose the next 2 games, they don't bring in any players, or the players they do bring in he's not satisfied with? What's preventing him doing another interview like that? I don't think there is. He's got nothing to lose. He's leaving at the end of the season. I think what he's trying to do is protect his reputation. I don't think it's necessarily an ego thing, but he's got plans, obviously, to leave Crystal Palace, and his plans will be ambition. He's got ambitions to leave Palace and go on to a bigger club. And he will probably get that opportunity, but part of that opportunity might depend on how he gets on at Palace this season. And I think he might have been thinking the fairy tale would be that I win the Conference League with Crystal Palace and I leave. My stock's really high. I've won 2 trophies, well, 3, you want to include the Community Shield. I've won the FA Cup, I've won the Conference League, got them back into Europa League. Look how good I am. And he'll have a lot of top clubs queuing up for him. And I still think he'll have a few. I still think he will. But I think what he's doing is trying to say, look, the reason that Palace are struggling at the minute, 10 games that I win, that ain't on me. This ain't on me. The squad's threadbare. I'm not happy about this. And I think he's just protecting himself at the minute. But I ain't convinced that he will be here till the end of the season. I think this is a manager. He obviously decided and informed the board in October that he wished to leave. But I think this is a manager that's now ready to leave. So I'm going to put him in the P45 time category. I think he's, maybe a couple of defeats away from another outburst. Eddie Howe, it feels weird. It's felt weird all season for Newcastle. Not helped by the disconnect in the boardroom and the manager. At the start of the transfer window, there was change. The names escaped me, sorry. Director of football left, obviously, just before the transfer window opened, and took them ages to get it going in the transfer window. And at the end of it, I think on paper they had a good window. Obviously, now you look at it and look at Alanga and think, well, that's not worked out. But I'll be honest, at the time, I thought it was a really good signing for Newcastle United. Ramsey is the most Ramsey thing ever. He's gone there and he's just been injured. But they signed an injury-prone player, so what do you expect? But even though it was a slow start for the season, Wissa went in and then was out for pretty much up until very recently. I get a weird vibe from Newcastle in general at the minute. Like things just aren't quite clicking for Eddie Howe and Newcastle United. And I don't think he's going to go anytime soon. But I do wonder if come the end of the season, if they fail to get Champions League football, will they decide to opt for change? I think they might, I'm going to put him in the needs to be careful. And it's maybe not that I think he'll get sacked this season. It might be that at the end of the season, if they don't get Champions League football, they might. Because Newcastle United's ambitions now is to have, the minimum would be to qualify for Champions League football. That's what the board will want at Newcastle. And Eddie's the reason they've got up to that standards. And he's almost a victim of his own success to some extent. But I just think, I don't know, do you know what I mean? Is anyone else just getting weird vibes from St. James's Park? I certainly am. Herzler, I'm also going to put him in the needs to be careful for similar reasons to Eddie Howe. I think there's a lot of Brighton fans just a little bit fed up with him now. Results have been inconsistent. They should be getting European football, in my opinion. I say should be getting European. They should be finishing 7th, 8th in the league. I think their squad's good enough. And he is obviously the youngest manager in the league, and I think he's still sort of developing and learning. And I think so far, I would say his time at Brighton's been okay. But you want to see progress. You want to see evidence that actually he's getting better, Brighton's getting better, that next season that they go on and become better than they are now. But I'm not seeing that at the moment with them. And I think the fans are starting to just get a little bit disconnected with what Herzler is serving up at Brighton. That's why I think come the end of the season, there may be a conversation around whether he's the right guy for Brighton or not. A lot of football to be played, 16 games, anything could happen. He could qualify for the Europa League, and then I think he'd probably stay. But do I think they'll qualify for Europa League? Maybe not. And therefore, that's why I think his job might be at risk. And that's why I'm going to put him in the needs to be careful category. David Moyes, I put him in the pretty safe. I mean, I was tempted to put him in the unsackable, but he's golden there. I've seen some complaints with Everton fans because they felt like he didn't take the Carabao Cup and FA Cup seriously. And I understand those frustrations because I think Everton are one of those clubs that they're not going to get relegated. So go try, win a trophy. But I think Moyes will have one eye on European football. I think Moyes will be thinking, I'm not too bothered about the Cups. I've had a lot of injuries recently. Some players back in light training will help them. can still go on and have a good season. But even if they were to finish, 10th or something, I think Moyes' job is really secure because they've been in relegation battle after relegation battle, or certainly looking over their shoulder in some seasons. Not this season. They've been a million miles away from it. They've never been in a relegation battle this season. And that's progress for Everton. And I think that's stability. That's what he was brought in to give them. That's what he's giving them. I think he's very safe. Nuno Espirito Santo, I mean, he's between the bottom two. It's, do I think they'd sack, if we got beat by Sunderland and Chelsea, do I think they'd sack him? I don't know. I think they would just give up and say, well, we're going down, might as well just leave him. What's the point in making change? But he is probably a couple of bad results away from potentially getting sacked, Nuno. It's just whether or not he can get enough results to keep him in a job. But like I said, even if we have bad ones, I think the board will say, oh, well, we're down. What's the point of sacking him? I would imagine there's a clause in his contract that if we get relegated, we can sack him for free. There should be a clause in his contract that allows for that. But obviously, we've got to be mathematically relegated before that clause is then active. So I think the board would maybe think, well, rather than paying him off, he's still got 2 years on his contract. Rather than paying him off, let's just wait until it's officially done. And then we can save ourselves a couple of million quid. So that's why I'm going to put him in needs to be careful. I think his job's in danger. I just think the board will wait till they can save some money. The manager's name that I always struggle to say, I don't know why, my brain just doesn't like it, Iriola. That's it, isn't it, Iriola? That's it, right. I'm going to put him in the needs to be careful. Not because I think he's going to get sacked, but because his contract expires and I think he might leave. So that's why I'm going to put him there. It's not so much the sacking, it's the departing. That's the only reason I'm going to put him in there. And listen, they've not been great, have they? One win in, 12 games now? They've had one win. But on Monday night against Brighton, they had 3 senior players on the bench, and that was it. So, got a bit of a skinny squad at the minute, and they're feeling the impact of it. Semenyo's gone, but they have just signed... What's that for? The Hungarian midfielder. Toff? I can't remember. They've just signed a defensive midfielder anyway. We've been linked to an attacking midfielder from Spain as well. So they are bringing in reinforcements. But again, I'll go back to the very start of the video. Some clubs will do player recruitment regardless of the head coach. And I think Bournemouth are one of them. I think it doesn't perhaps depend on Ariola being at the club, whether they bring in this player. I think it's more of a, this is who we as a football club want. And it suits the way that we as a football club want to play football. He's just the current head coach. And if he goes, the next guy will come in and be able to work with what we've got. It's just his contract situation, and that I think that he may leave Bournemouth at the end of the season. That's why I'm going to put him in that tier. Scott Parker, this is difficult, isn't it? Because I know there's been a lot of discontent from Burnley fans, and they've been a bit unhappy. The boos have been ringing out, and they were chanting, "You don't know what you're doing," or whatever at him a few weeks ago. But since then, they've got a couple of decent draws. I actually think, no, do you know what? I'm going to do it. This is my tier list. This is my video, my tier list, not Turf Moor tier list. I think he's pretty safe. I don't think they'll sack him unless something goes badly wrong. And I don't think it has gone badly wrong yet. And I think they might be looking at it, which is, if we do sack Parker, who are we going to get? Well, let's get someone that's going to get us back up if we go down. Okay, who's that? Scott Parker. So I think they might be looking at it saying, well, let's just keep him. And if we stay up, wonderful. If we go down, not ideal, but we've got the right manager for the Championship in Scott Parker. I think he's safe, even though some would like to see change. I'm not a Burnley fan. I don't think there will be change. I think Parker's there to stay. Who we got next? Pep Guardiola. I mean, it should be unsackable, right? But I don't think it is. I'm going to put it in careful. And the reason being, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. And there's a lot of talk that this could be his last season. You know, Enzo Maresca getting sacked, and part of the reason Chelsea sacked him is because he had talks in Manchester City. And I remember that tweet from David Ornstein that said that Enzo Maresca is on the shortlist to replace Pep Guardiola when he finally moves on. And that was when he was still Chelsea manager, but that was unsurprising. It's like, right, yeah, we've got the connections to Man City, we've got the connections to Pep, fine. It wasn't, wow, him? Really? It was okay. But the thing that made me raise an eyebrow wasn't the news. It was the timing of the news. Why now? Why is that news coming out now? Well, we know why, because Maresca was having talks with Man City, allegedly. Why would they be doing that? Well, maybe Man City know that Pep's off. Remember, Glasner's told us, he told Palace in October he was off. Well, that's 3 months ago. No one knew about it. Everyone suspected he would go, but Palace knew for definite he was leaving 3 months ago. Jurgen Klopp in Liverpool, there was a couple of months between Klopp informing the club he was off and Klopp announcing he was off. So it is possible that the board know Pep's leaving at the end of the season. He might not be, but it just doesn't feel... It just doesn't feel right at the minute. Getting beat by Bodo last night as well, and I've seen some Man City fans saying that Pep was acting a little bit weird after the game as well and just didn't feel or look right. I'm on board with that one. While I don't subscribe to what the Burnley fans are saying, I will subscribe to what the Manchester City fans are saying. I'm going to put Pep in that category. Libri, no chance. Unsackable. He'd be behind Emery probably on this list. A fantastic manager. I really like him. Up there for manager of the year. You know, Sunderland came up, and they are an ambitious football club, and they've got an ambitious board and chairman. But even I'd imagine their ambition this season would have been to stay in the Premier League. Just stay in the Premier League. They've absolutely they're cruising, but they play all right football at times as well. Tactically, every single game there's something a little bit different with Libri in charge. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful head coach. I think Sunderland have got someone fantastic at the helm, and I think they realise that. I think they know that. But there's just no chance he leaves. The only way he might leave is if he gets poached. But I'm not so sure he would go just yet. Because unlike Crystal Palace, Sunderland do have ambitions. Palace, it feels a bit like they're okay with what they've got. Whereas I don't think Sunderland are. I think Sunderland want to get into the top half of the Premier League. I think they want to go get European football. And when you are the head coach, that's going to appeal to you, that you've got an ambitious board. So I think he's safe as houses, but I also think he's really comfortable with where he is as well. Liam the Senior, I'll put him in pretty safe. If he's here in 3 years, I'll be very impressed, but he's just got the job. And I like him, by the way. I would have had him at West Ham last summer when he left Hull City. Even though he got sacked, I think that was the wrong decision. It was a silly decision. I watched a bit of Hull when the Senior was there because I liked the way that they played football. And there's some good players for the Championship as well. And listen, they may have been correct, which is he didn't achieve enough at Hull that season. Maybe he didn't, and that would be fair. But it didn't make him a bad manager. I think he'll do all right at Chelsea. I'll put him in pretty safe category. Marco Silva. I mean, it's in the middle of the two, purely based on his contract again. If it was will he get sacked? No, he's up at the top. But will he leave? Possibly. I'll put him in pretty safe. Just and the only thing preventing me from putting him in unsackable, because I think he is that contract situation. It's on the table. This is what I believe. Fulham fans, if you've got this far, forgive me if I'm wrong. Feel free to correct me in the comment section. But I believe there's a 3-year contract on the table for him. He's just not signed it yet, or may not sign it. And I think he should. I think he's a good fit for Fulham, and I think Fulham's a good fit for him. It just might just be that ambition thing. Does Fulham have the ambitions to match those of Marco Silva? Because if he wants to get European football, he's going to require money spent, and they didn't spend it in the summer. And he spoke quite openly about his frustrations in the transfer market. And again, this January transfer window, there's very little happening in the way of transfers at Craven Cottage. So I can understand his frustrations, and I suspect if I had put money on it, I'd actually put money on it that he might leave in the summer. But I don't know if he's maybe just waiting to see what comes up between now and then. Does Thomas Frank get sacked? If so, is he in with a shout? And if the answer is no, then he might be better off just staying where he is. Would he consider going to Crystal Palace as a step up, or would he consider Fulham the bigger club? Don't know. But if Glasner left, would he want that job? Wait and see. I'm actually going to put him in needs to be careful. I'm almost convincing myself that he might leave Craven Cottage on his terms. Aaron Slot, I'm going to put him in needs to be careful. It just doesn't feel great, does it? Does it feel great? And I think it's one of them, they'll go through this season, they'll possibly get Champions League football. And unless he wins something else, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the summer. But Liverpool tend to be patient. They tend to be patient with their managers and give them as much time as they can. But the Salah thing didn't help. And the African Cup of Nations came at the right time for Salah, but also came at the right time for Arne Slot. And while Salah's been gone, they've not lost a game of football, Liverpool. To play Champions League tonight, time of recording is Wednesday, they've not played a Champions League game yet. So they haven't lost a game while Salah's been at the African Cup of Nations. And I think that's really helped Slot. But he's back now. So now what? Is he back? Is he going to be the right winger again? Is he going to be on the bench again? And there's potential this can of worms is going to get reopened. But I'm just not feeling it with Arne Slot. And Thomas Frank, you can't put him anywhere else other than P45 time. Got the win in the Champions League last night, but you do feel like it's just borrowed time at the minute. It's a case of when and not if, because they play Burnley away this weekend. Would you put money on Spurs winning? I mean, to be fair, in fairness, I think only Arsenal have got a better away record in the Premier League than Spurs, so they are brilliant away from home. It's just at home. And that's where the fans are going to judge you more, because they're paying, especially Spurs fans, they're paying top whack for their season tickets. And they're just not seeing wins. 2 wins at home all season in the Premier League. It's not good. Loads of tickets unsold for the Champions League game last night as well. It's not a good look for Thomas Frank, and it's not a good look for Spurs. So there you go. That's my final tier list. I think I'm happy with it. I've got Andrews, Arteta, Emery, and Lebris in the unsackable. I've got Carrick, just because he's the interim manager, in pretty safe with Edwards, Farke, Moyes, Parker and Visinha. Needs to be careful for one reason or another. I've discussed why. Dyche, Howe, Herzler, Nuno, Iviola, Pep, Silva, Arne Slot, and then P45 time. Those who I think are a couple of results away from potentially getting sacked, or a couple of outbursts away, is Glasner and Thomas Frank. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Hope you enjoyed my random discussion on the manager. It's just something I wanted to talk about today. But please do get involved in the comments below. Let me know which tier you would put each manager. Any you think I've got really wrong, let me know in the comment section as well. I'll be back later on for a little discussion with you. So thank you very much for joining me. Before you go, if you don't mind dropping a like on the video by clicking thumbs up, that would be much appreciated. Subscribe to Tartan Geo, and catch you in a bit.